Okay, well, I just want to say thanks for everybody coming out. My talk tonight is on Git and GitHub, the wonderful world of version control. My name is Chris DeMars. You can see me on Twitter at Salt and Burnham. If you're a Supernatural fan, you'll understand that, right? You'll understand what Salt and Burnham is. So, a little bit about me. I am a student at Baker College in Elm Park. I'll be graduating in June, hopefully with some more straight A's. I'm also a student co-op at DT Energy, working on internal mobile hybrid apps. Part of the project, I'm using IBM Worklight inside Eclipse to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript for a couple apps. And another framework that me and Andy are actually using is the Ionic framework. Really cutting edge hybrid mobile app framework that uses HTML, CSS, and Angular. Angular really makes it the way it is. So we already did intros, but I do want to go around the room and just ask everybody what your passion is. What do you love the most? So, Monica, what's your passion?
That's kind of tough. Not related to anything. Tech, reading.
Reading?
And the beach.
Okay.
Music, piano, and programming.
Okay.
Making things easier for people to use.
Right up.
Doesn't matter what it is.
That's good.
And neutrality stuff.
Sweet.
Tech, games, and comedy.
Reading and problem solving.
Andy?
I definitely love all this tech and development stuff, but I love to ride bikes too a lot, so I'm really back into that stuff. Especially since spring's coming.
Right.
Slow roll Sunday.
Yeah, Slow Roll Sunday. Starts, kicks off.
Do you guys do it?
I haven't yet, but I really want to.
I've ridden across the state of Michigan 3 times.
MS 150. Everybody do that.
Michigan,
So
well,
many,
down in
yeah, so many great places to bike.
Sweet.
Besides technology, art and music.
What about you?
Your coding, language technologies.
Nick, what's your passion?
I like working with my hands. So it could be code, could be building stuff. I just, I gotta do about half and half of each because I'll get burnt out if I do too much
Right.
digital or too much non.
Sarah, what's your passion?
Oh, this is a darker question.
Leave it open, it's really hot.
Yeah.
Maybe right now it's kind of teaching and mentoring, probably. Coding is probably second, golf, 3,
So what's your occupation? What do you do?
software engineer.
Software engineer. Okay. Cool. All right, so let's get on to the good stuff. First things first, Git does not equal GitHub, first and foremost. Sometimes you hear these two terms get thrown around a lot. Oh, I know Git, and we use this and we use that. But it's like Java and JavaScript. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I know Java, when they really mean they know JavaScript, or vice versa. Two totally different things, so don't get them mixed up, because sometimes you'll get that one programmer who's, oh, there's a difference. There's a big difference. You can't say that in the web dev field. And they'll jump all over you and just let it go in one ear and out the other. That's just the way it is. So what is version control? Well, I'm going to pose the question, what do you guys think version control is? If you're not familiar with it, what do you think it is?
I would say it's the best way to manage your code, the way to work with the teams to make sure you're all on the same page and have a high level view of where your code is, where it's been, and how to manipulate it and control it.
That's a good answer. Yeah, I would say the same thing. You hear terms like versioning your code and what that really means, and or you hear the term remote repo or local repo, and if you're new to version control, you have really no idea what they're talking about. So we're going to get into that and what all that stuff means tonight. So that'll bring us to centralized repos. Now, centralized version control, it's a single server that contains all the files. So clients can check out files from a centralized location, and then they push it back to a centralized location. A good example of this would be Subversion. Subversion's a centralized VCS where it's on one server, you pull it down, you don't have a copy of that local code on your machine, and you just push it back up. The centralized server represents a single point of failure, meaning that if the server goes down, nobody can work. So, like what you were saying with hard disks, if the server sits on a hard disk and that hard disk crashes, you lose everything. You got to start from scratch, and that could be a big problem with centralized version control systems. I mean, there's a lot of good things, but with it being a single point of failure, that could be one of the riskiest things. There's also local version controlling, which is just like save as on your local machine, and we all know that your machine crashes, all your code's gone, just like a centralized machine. So that brings us to distributed version control. Git is a DVCS. So what a DVCS means is a distributed version control system. So there's code out there, and if you pull it down, you can have all that code, a copy of that whole entire repo on your machine. So if you're working with 5 other developers, every single developer on that team can have a copy of that code. So if this person's machine dies or the server crashes, somebody is always going to have a backup of that repo. So essentially you fully mirror the repo that's out there that was created. And this also makes for a really, really easy collaboration for a small knit team, a big team. It doesn't really matter how many people. So examples of these would be Subversion. Like I said, Subversion is centralized, and Mercurial and Git, those are distributed version control systems. I'm not sure how much Mercurial is used, but I know SVN is used a lot, especially in enterprise systems. ClearCase, we use at DTE, so we use Subversion and we use ClearCase. And I'm trying to make my way in there with Git, but we're going to see how that moves. Hasn't worked yet, but we'll see, definitely. So what is Git? First, before I tell you what it is, let me tell you what it's not. So it's not Dropbox, right? It's not Subversion, because they're 2 different types of systems altogether. And it's not Google Drive. Now, all these things, you can save your code and images to these different platforms, but to my best knowledge, they only act as a local versioning system, not a distributed or centralized versioning system. So Git is software in a way that acts as a mini file system and stores snapshots of files. Oh, it's going the wrong way. There we go. All right, we're good. So Git is software that in a way acts as a mini file system and stores snapshots of files for versioning, not the actual files themselves. So what I mean by this is that Git doesn't see actual files from files. So if you were to take this image and cut it in half, and this is your original, and the things that change from the original are the necklace is tilted, she got a Pepsi can in her hand. That's all Git sees, not the file itself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's like, so who read highlights when they were a kid? Or who had highlights? Or had children who had highlights, right? Okay, so did I. The difference images where you have to circle the differences from page to page, that's essentially how Git works. It just sees snapshots and differences, not files. And that's why it makes it so quick and so fast, because it's not versioning files. So it doesn't have to upload files, it's just uploading the changes. Or seeing the changes and going from there and versioning them. So who made this sweet thing called Git? Does anybody know who this guy is? No?
You'll know him when he's...
Yeah. So who knows what Linux is?
I don't.
Linux? Okay. This guy is Linus Torvalds. He is the developer of the Linux kernel, right? Linux built off of the Unix kernel, of course. So he actually made Git. Him and the Linux community wanted something faster, simpler design, and fully distributed. So 2005, Git was born. This year will be 10 years old that Git has been, out there for the world, open source, ready to use. So that's pretty cool, especially coming from an open source background. It wasn't a corporation type deal. So this is a local repo. A local repo is like a file cabinet in your folder. It stores, tracks, adds, and commits the files that are in it. So this is the first step to version control. Well, sort of. So in this repo, so this is on my local machine. Right down here, refresh git is the folder. And I have a git repo initialized inside. And I'm on the master branch, and we'll get to the master branch later. But this is what a local repo looks like on your machine in your terminal, if you work in terminal. Yeah, once we start going over commands and committing all the things, then it'll be really nice. So git init, this is one of the first commands that you're going to learn when you're using Git in the terminal, or Git bash, whatever your platform is for. This initializes the repo in your folder or directory in order to start versioning the files that you have in that directory. So once you install Git and you configure it, and you have your folder structure set up in your files, you're automatically going to want to git init. So that's going to initialize a repo in that folder with a .git folder to start tracking and versioning your files. That way you can push them out to a remote, pull down changes, clone, different things like that. So that brings us on to what is GitHub. So this is from Wikipedia. I know it's not a credible source, but it pretty much says it. GitHub is a web-based Git repository hosting service which offers all the distributed version control and source code management functionality of Git, as well as adding its own features. So in normal terms, it's a cloud-hosted service that stores your files that are versioned through Git. It is what I like to call the dopeness. So this might be a little hard to see. Let me see if I can't make it bigger. Nice. So this is a screenshot of my repo, or the Refresh Detroit repo. And it's no longer here. I had to delete it, but so the remote repo, you have all your files, and this is everything that would be inside locally on your machine. So when you set up a file structure in a folder, the name is Refresh Detroit-Git, and I have CSS folder, JavaScript, images. So essentially this is mirroring your local repo, which is your local file structure. Like I said, it's a file cabinet that holds all your stuff. Down here is a README file that just spits out what the repo is all about, or how to, if you're have a specific feature or specific software that you're open sourcing, you can put the instructions here to download that or to clone the repo. You have all your options over here to view the code, issues, pull requests, your settings if you want to delete the repo. You can clone the repo to desktop. You can download the zip if you don't want to clone it. Here's the URL to actually clone the repo. And I'll go more into this as we move further on. Name, add repo, watch, unwatch, star, fork. So this is where all the code gets stored remotely when you push all your changes out to your remote origin. So what can be stored? What do you guys think could be stored here, or version in general? Just code, anything? Video files? Video file? Okay, you can version video files. Images, you can version those. Code, of course. Documents. I've heard that, the medical field uses version control systems, Git, Subversion, to store medical files or things that change. Of course, it's on lockdown, of course. It's got to be. But, I've heard accountants, lawyers. It's used everywhere, just not, in the web development, software development field. So yeah, it's really, really, really nice. Also, there's also a git ignore file in here, which I'll talk about later, and I'll show you where you can get a git ignore file. Really, really important when you start pushing out code that you don't want to go out, because there's certain files you don't want to push out remotely that you want people to bring down. So I'll explain that as we get further down during the demo. So this brings us to watch, star, and fork. So when you watch and unwatch a repo, so say you go to my repo and you go to my GitHub page and you can go to any one of my repos that you want, and if you really see what I'm doing and read the README and dig what I'm doing and like the code quality and you think you could contribute or want to know more about what's going on, you can watch my repo and see, you get updates on your GitHub page about, hey, you know, so-and-so committed this, or they added this branch, or they deleted that branch, just so you can keep up with what's going on. So watch means to watch this repo and receive notifications about it. Like I said, pull requests, any issues that come up. Star means keeping track of the repos you like, so that's kind of like a like button in Facebook. You can star any repo that you want, and that'll just push ratings up for the different repos and different GitHub pages that are out there. And I can show you guys that too. Fork means to make a copy of the repo as a repo for yourself. So you're not, when you fork something, you're not forking it locally, right? You're forking it, bringing that whole repo, that remote repo, and putting that remote repo in your remote repo. Once you do that, then you can clone that repo down to your machine, and you can start making changes, and that's a good way to contribute to open source. So I can show you guys how that works. I won't show you how to do a pull request or anything like that, but I'll try to get to this page. So this is my GitHub page. So we can go in here, and it shows that I have 3 commits, so I've committed 3 times. I have 1 branch, which is my master. I am the sole contributor, so there's 1. So you can watch, not watching, be notified when participating. If I can get this a little bit. Watching, being notified of all conversations. Or you could ignore it completely. You can star it, and then you can essentially you could fork it. I don't know if you can. I don't think you can fork your own repo. But here we go. So yeah, it's just some cool things that you can do on GitHub's page. Like I said, it's more social than anything to do that. But if you want to contribute to anything, keeping in touch with everybody's repos and big developers in the game, like Marcy Sutton, she always posts accessibility things. In bugs, she finds in code, hey, can you help me out with ng aria this or ng aria that in this Angular code? And people submit issues and bug fixes, and the list goes on. So it's pretty neat. So this brings us to clone. Cloning a repo is pulling down a repo to your local machine so that it is now part of your machine with its own file structure and its own repo. So essentially, you don't have to create the repo in the folder itself. You can have the folder, but once you clone down somebody else's repo, it automatically creates that folder structure for you because it's bringing everything down recursively, and it's creating that Git repo automatically. And I personally found this out when me and Andy were working the other day. I was cloning something down, and I was also creating a repo inside, and it was having a bunch of issues. So I just deleted everything, recloned it, and then ran a git status, and it showed me that you have a repo initialized. You're good to go. Here's your file structure. Start making changes and adding to be committed. So it's pretty cool to clone. It's a good way to contribute to open source. Like I said, you can make changes and submit a pull request and wait for a merge. And the easiest way to do it is git clone, copy that URL, and then you can do just a git clone paste, and then it'll bring everything down from that person's remote repo onto your machine, which I'll show you the command later on as we get further down. But it's a good way to contribute to open source if you're really wanting to start getting into that.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to ask. So I downloaded it to my machine. And that's where it stays unless I do something and ask them if they want to call me, but how would I get it? Like say I wanted to take something to build on it and not worry about messing around with anybody else's code,
Okay.
but I don't want to end up on my desktop permanently.
So what you would do is you'd go to that repo, right? Whatever whatever you like, whatever you feel passionate about, and you want to hack on the code yourself, even if you're not giving it back to them. If you just want to go and build on it and make something for yourself, you'd fork it, so you get exact copy of that repo on your remote, on GitHub,
Remote, okay,
yeah,
whereas,
and then you clone that down to your machine. So you can hack all day, push it back up, and it's just going to go to your repo, your remote, not theirs.
okay.
Now, if you wanted to submit, you'd do a pull request, which is out of the scope of this talk tonight. But there's a lot of tutorials out there. It's kind of lengthy to do it. You have to submit a pull request, and you got to do a comment. You got to wait for a merge. So, but I mean, it's possible to do it. So if that's how you want to do it, by all means, fork it, clone it, push it, submit a pull request. But yeah, to do it yourself, fork it, clone it, push it right back up to your remote, and you can do that all day. So there's a lot of issues with code. It doesn't matter what kind of code it is. If somebody pulls down your code and tries to run it, there might be a small bug. Going back to Marcy and the whole accessibility, there's always bugs in it. People are fixing things. I don't know how many issues Git actually has on their remote repo, but there's always issues. If you have a really big code base or a really big project, there's going to be problems. So this is where you can submit issues about someone else's code or your own code. You can submit issues about your own code and see if anybody out there can help you fix it. Get the word out. I can't figure this out. What am I doing wrong? This is issue number blah blah. Have somebody fork it, clone it, and then make changes, run it, and go from there. Like I said, if code's buggy or something's out of whack, then this is the place to report it. And this brings us back to the pull requests. When you want to make changes or add to someone's code and have them merged into their master branch, you submit a pull request. This lets them review the changes with comments and ultimately decide to put your code in. If they think, okay, this is perfect, this is a good fit, this is what I'm looking for, let's merge it in. And then you'll be notified because they'll give you an app mention, hey, we merged your code in, check it out. Pull it back down if you want to keep hacking on it. This is one of the top, with clone and fork is the top way of contributing to open source projects. Who's scared of this? Raise your hand. I know you're scared of it. Terminal, it's not something to be scared of.
I'm raising my hand because I was going to say that I'm not scared, but having used some version control systems, I was leery and did the source tree, or whatever. I started out with the GUI thing, and I'm like, immediately I'm like, okay, they're going to make me pay and all that. So we just started using the command line. I was really impressed with how well, meaning the syntax, the verbiage, the guiding, even the coloring of the
Syntax.
how they guide you. Yeah, it was really nice, like well thought out. That I was really impressed.
Well, I'm here to tell you that terminal is your best friend, right? It is. It's your best friend. I love it. I love working in the terminal. I got the first taste of working in the terminal when I was working on Linux machines a few years ago in school. You know, you open up terminal and you just start hacking. And I had an actual Linux class, so I learned a lot of the commands there. And it's like, it feels like you can harness so much power when you can move through a file system based on a command, not a double click. That's a lot of power, right? You can control the whole system. But this is where it all happens. Don't be scared. It's a great thing to learn being a developer, whether you're a seasoned developer or you're, a junior, just getting into the game. They're just Linux commands. That's it. If you know Linux, you don't have to know every single Linux command, grep pipe, this, that, and the other thing. You don't have to know any of that to do basic terminal traversal, I guess, file traversal. This one right here, this is nothing special. I just have a Node server running in this one just to watch file changes, stuff like that. That's out of the scope of this completely. That's a whole nother talk on Node, which maybe Andy can do one day. But no, it's really cool, especially if you download a different bash. Like I'm running Oh My ZSH, so I have highlighting of different things, and it's not just plain black and white screen or green and black. So terminal's where it's at. So don't be afraid of it. Honestly, it's your best friend because it's something good to learn. And even if you don't know it, don't let any developer tell you you're not a developer if you can't work in the terminal, because that's just a bunch of bullshit. I'll be right up front with you about it. I've heard it too many times. People, well, you're not a developer. You don't work in the terminal. I can do the same thing you can do, and I'm writing the same code. So it's personal preference. I mean, companies want you to know how to work in the terminal, but if you don't, it doesn't make you any less of a developer. So that brings us to the common commands in Linux. CD for change directory, cd ... period to change the directory one level up. ls lists files. ls-a is show all the files. pwd print working directory. Touch is creating a file. mkdir mkdir makes a directory or it creates a folder, essentially the same thing. Make directory, create a folder. And rm-r means remove recursively. So learning this stuff is fun, believe me. Like I said, I started learning it when I was learning Linux, and since Apple machines, Macs are built on top of Linux, you can kind of get the gist for it. Recursive means all the contents of the folder, including subfolders. So if you have a folder that's my project, and you have your index.html inside it, you have a JavaScript folder, a CSS folder, an images folder, and you want to just get rid of everything, you would do that folder rm-r, and it would remove that folder and all subfolders inside it. So yeah, I'm going to demo this in the terminal. We can do that right now. If I can get into it. All right, so right now I'm in my nodebots folder. I'm on master branch. So we could cd tilde / and that'll take me to my root, right? So I can list all the files in my root. I can change directories to documents. I can cd back up to my root. Let's go back into documents. If I wanted to see all the files listed out, just like that, ls-a. I could do if you get too deep in your file structure and you don't know where you're at, you can always just do pwd print working directory. So that'll tell you you're in users /DeMars /documents, and then touch make directory, move recursively. I'll show you that guy. I'll show you guys that later. Let me get back to So that brings us to Git Bash for Windows. Now Git Bash is a shell that you can run Git commands in and functions like a Linux terminal. So you can't just use the command prompt in Windows. It doesn't work that way. You'd have to download. There's a couple different clients, but Git Bash is the one I've always seen used, and it works just like the terminal in Linux. It's a Bash script or a shell that you can do. Git init, Git all that. Run the same type of Linux commands in it if you wanted to use a terminal in your Windows. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes and the reason everybody came here. The common Git commands. So I'm going to run through this real quick. Git. Oh, I'm going to because I got a couple tables and that we could turn this into a poll, sort of.
Oh, I didn't realize there was dancing tonight.
Oh, there's going to be dancing.
Have my dancing shoes.
So Git init. That initializes the repo in your folder. Git add adds the files to be staged and tracked. Git commit -m commits the file with a message. Git status lets you know and you check what you're doing when you do a git status. Git push means push to remote repo, i.e. GitHub, or any other type of system out there that runs with Git commands, but I'm promoting GitHub. Git pull, that you can pull down remote repos to your local, and by your local I mean your local machine. In Git log, you can check the commit time, the date, and the diff of that commit. Now, a word on the git commit -m. If you don't add the dot or the -m flag after your commit, then Git will throw you into Vim if you're on a Mac, or Notepad if you're on Windows. And if you're an old school developer, you might like being thrown into Vim because you know your way around, :WQ, and you'll be out of it. But if you're new and you only use the terminal and you don't know what Vim is, you're not going to like being thrown in there without knowing how to get back out. So I'm going to show all the commands of this stuff on the demo because this is a basic workflow right here. You init, add, commit, status everything, push, pull, log, throw a log in there. So yeah, I'm going to show that when I do the demo at the end. Git status, all the things. I can't stress this enough. You want to make sure you status everything. I don't care what you're doing. You status after init, you status after add, you status after commit. Because you can get too far deep and not know what you're doing. And this is a perfect example. I did this. I initialized the repo on my root file structure and added and committed everything in this machine to a remote repo. Why? Because I didn't status. If you don't know what you're doing, you can screw shit up big time. A buddy of mine, James, actually had to, because James is the one that taught me all the Git things. He pulled me out of that when I said, yo, you need to unstage all this stuff. And you need to know what you're doing. Never initialize a repo on the root level, ever. So make sure you're actually in your folder before you get init.
Unless you're trying to back up your machine.
Unless you're doing that. Yeah, then we can just back it up and just git commit all the things. Bonus. So yeah, this is very, very, very important. I can't stress enough. Andy knows that. Every time we work together, I tell him status, 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 status.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. Like again, like you said, like Chris was saying, like when as we started playing around, messing around, and you're on the command line, you're like, okay, where are we at? What are we doing? Just status, and then it'll tell you in this really nice language that you can read. You just slow down and read it, and it says, here's what stages, what's not stages, what you might need to do. It's really intuitive, and it literally almost like leads you through the process.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's also helpful if you mess up with some commands where you can reset and go back in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it tells you, right? Oh, if you want to undo this thing that you have these file stages, you can
get reset and all that. So that brings us on to staging versus committing. So there's three, I guess you could say, trees in Git. You got your working directory, your staging area, and your Git directory, which this seems kind of backwards to me. So your working directory would be your directory on your machine. So that's where you have all your code. Your staging area is called an index, and that's where when you do an add, it goes there. So it's hanging in limbo. So you can either pull it back down or you can commit it out to the repo, the final repo, which is the Git directory repository. And then that's where you pull all your stuff back down. So you can check that out, bring it back into your staging area, and then pull it back down, make changes. Staging adds files to almost the middle tier in the Git stack. You can unstage using the reset command, which pulls the file out of the staging area. And committing, quote unquote, pushes the snapshot to being pushed or merged. So branches. Branches are tricky, but they're a very powerful feature of your workflow. And we're going to get into what those are. Not too deep into it, because I don't even know a deep understanding of branches. But for your basic branches, so what is a branch? It's a separate offshoot of master. So master is your main branch. That's the one that you work off of. The main branch that you can play with and not mess up the master branch. So picture a tree or a vine. We'll go with a vine of different fruit. Right? So I want everybody to close their eyes and picture this. So everybody picture a vine or a tree with different fruit on it. One branch is the main. One branch has raisins, and the other has cranberries. Awesome features, right? Well, they merge into master, and what do we get? Open your eyes. Now, I know that's not a raisin, right? It's a California raisin, but the principle. But do you see what I'm saying? You have your master branch, and you got raisins and cranberries. You merge them back together into master, and you get craisins. So,
Is it like useful if something's not working and you take a branch, to just kind of take it out,
Yep.
take it separate and see if that's gonna work, and that way you don't screw anything up, just like underneath it.
yeah, so it's for the one main thing branches are for, which we're going to get to right now. This is going to answer your question. Used for bug fixes, used for features that eventually get merged into master after the code has been reviewed and or tested. So an example would be if you wanted to have a sweet modal box feature for a form pop-up, right? And you would create a branch which clones the master, which when you automatically create a branch, it's going to create a copy of master on that branch. And add the feature there and test. If it works out, then those changes can get merged and you can delete that branch. So the person that's going to merge that in is whoever's overseeing that source code. Whoever's overseeing the master branch. If they think, okay, this is cool, we'll merge it in. So to create a new branch, you would do a git checkout -b, whatever the branch of the name is, my branch. And then if you want to check out that branch, which means pull it down, you would do a git checkout my branch. It's kind of tricky. I mean, if you're just doing stuff like just local stuff, not huge projects, just work on, I just work on master. But if you're working with a few other people or a project, you want to have branches for different features and then merge them back in later.
Yeah, one benefit of using a branch is to like kind of isolate your code. So that way, yes, if you're working on something, but you're not exactly sure where it's going to go, or if you're going to use it, like make a branch.
Right.
And that way, even if you're committing to that branch, and you're deciding either, yeah, this is good, and you want to put it into the full project, or, nah, I think I'm going to go in a different direction, you can just, go back to the master branch and delete all the work you just did without having to, undo a bunch of commits or revert stuff.
Right.
You kind of have like a safe, use your master branch as like a safe spot.
Yeah.
Safe spot that you can always get back to and it'll work.
Definitely. Yeah, that's another good thing about it. You're preserving code.
And I think I can continue with that example, right? Like even if you start down that branch and you had an idea and you park it and you don't even do anything with the branch, just leave it there. And you go back to main, and then a year later you're like, oh, hey, that idea I had might have been good. You just leave it, you go right back to that branch. You can just keep walking down and then decide to merge later. So it's anything you want to do that's parallel. Or if you want to spin up 5 developers and start, doing different features in parallel and merging, you can use it that way as well.
And another, what we've found is that if this always happens, you're working on some feature in a branch, and then you have to fix something on the live version. If it wasn't in a branch, you'd have to undo a bunch of work, fix it, and then redo that work. This allows you to flip back, make your fix, and then go back to your branch and keep working on it.
Yep. So our standard development workflows where master, your bug fix branch, and then your development, your next, release 2 2.1 branch, release 3.0 branch. If you're doing 3.0 in parallel with 2.1, that's when you really start to, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So this brings us up to reset. Now, essentially, reset unstages files that are in the index or the staging area, specifying the file from head, just unstages the file. Flags to do soft and hard resets. They have those, but it's out of the scope of this talk to do a soft and a hard reset. And I might show this one in the demo. But the fun starts now. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to walk through how to set up a GitHub page. I was going to try and go through my page, but I'll figure something out. So the first thing you're going to want to do, you're going to want to download Git for your OS and install it. So you want to go to git-scm.com/downloads. If you haven't already done it, you can do it later. These slides will be up somewhere. You can also get older releases as well for your specific OS. You're going to want to, first thing you want to do, you're going to want to git config --global user.name with your name, and then the same thing with your email. This just configures Git as a user, you as a user, so you can identify yourself with commit logs. I can't really show that because I already have mine already set up, but that's essentially what it does. But I can do a Git log. If you're not comfortable in the terminal, there's plenty of clients out there you can use. For Mac or Linux, Git Bash, like I said, for Windows. And then you can always download a GUI client and still get the job done. Don't listen to your naysayers or terminal junkies. It doesn't make you less of a developer. So you got GitHub for Windows, Gitbox, SourceTree, GitHub for Mac, Tower. There's a bunch of them, free and paid. So when you set up a GitHub page, you go to github.com and you're going to do sign up. Pick your username or email. It's usually set up with an email. Choose a username, password, and then you'll have your GitHub page set up. You can add a picture for your avatar. It's pretty cut and dry, just like your standard sign-up form. So this is the GitHub page. It's got your image. It's got where you're from, email address, website, the date you joined. You can search for people or companies. You can follow them. Have people following you. Explore, a gist, GitHub's blog, help, create new repo, your settings, you can edit your profile. These are all your repos, and they can say which one you're updated. They have descriptions. They use, depending on how you save your files, will update on your GitHub repo. So like all this right here was JavaScript, because it initially it used Reveal.js. So it knew it was JavaScript to put it as a tag. A couple other ones is just straight CSS or HTML, so it can distinguish what it is. If you have any forks, it'll tell you right here that it's been forked this many times, it's been liked this many times. So that's where all your repos are. So when you create a new repo, that's where it's going to be. But don't go to that one because it's deleted. So all this does not work with. You got two commands to make this work, and this is my favorite right here. Git push. This command tells Git to push all the things your committed code out to the remote repo. So what you would do is, after you do all your committing, you'll have when you set up your repo on GitHub, it'll tell you git push origin master. You put that in your terminal, pushes it all up, and you can see the changes in your repo on that GitHub page. And you have git pull. This command tells Git to pull all the newest code out of the remote repo and place in your local to continue to be worked on. So git pull does the opposite of what push does. It pulls the code down to sync with the local repo, brings in the newest changes, and I can show you a demo of that too. So git ignore, I know I talked about this a little bit, touched on it earlier. It's a file created to ignore files you don't want to push remotely. So two websites you can go to is gitignore.io, which I'll show you that. And common gitignore is a site I did. It's a GitHub repo, but it's got your just common gitignore files. So if you just want to go there, grab it, copy and paste it into a gitignore file, you can go there. So it's demo time. So let me. Let's get this set up. All right, so I'm already in my documents. I'm just going to list it out. What do I have in here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory. So make directory, refresh. I'm going to check it again. So it's in there. I'm going to cd into it. Nothing's in there, so I'm going to make another directory. Call it CSS. Make directory JavaScript. Make directory images. Oops. So right now you can list out the folder structure. It's CSS, images, and JavaScript are the folders I have in there, but I don't have anything in them yet. And then I'm going to touch, which is create a file, index.html. So that created the .html file for me. So I'll check it again, ls. So now I have the CSS, images, JavaScript, and the index file. So what I'm going to do is I am going to open up the index file. And we'll just write some stuff. Everybody see good? Cool. All right, sweet. So just have a paragraph tag inside the HTML. Just say hello, and then we'll save it. So now we have that in there. We're going to do a git init. So that shows that I initialized an empty Git repository in my refresh folder. So now it's going to start tracking all the things. So do a git status. The only untracked folder or file in there is index.html. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a git add index.html. Git status. So I have a new file that's being tracked that needs to be committed. I'm also going to add the CSS folder, the JavaScript folder, and the images folder. Do another git status again. So they should all be in there. We'll see. Hopefully this works. So I'm going to go over here to my GitHub page. And this tool I'm using is called Divi. It's an awesome tool to split your screen. It's like $14. I think you can use a free version of it for a little while, but it's pretty cool to get the split screen functionality. So I'm going to create a new repo. And we'll just call it, refresh. Now I'm not going to initialize a README with this. Refresh, repo, refresh to get talk. So I created that repo. Now before I do anything, since I have all these files added, I want to git commit -m with a comment. So initial commit. So one file changed, 5 insertions. Git status. It says I'm on branch master and I have nothing to commit. Working directory is clean. So I have nothing that needs to be changed or that needs to be committed. It's already committed. So I have the local repo ready, set to go. And you just copy this code right down here. Git remote add origin HTTPS, and that's the name of the repo.
Before you go any further.
Yeah.
So it's back to your like original tree. All your files are in that middle section right now.
Right.
The staging area. They're not up to your repository, but they're off your machine.
They're on my machine right now.
They're on your machine.
Yes.
They're staged.
They were staged.
And this is going to send it all the way up.
Yeah, because once I committed it to the Git repository locally.
Right.
So this is going to push all that code out to GitHub once you do the remote add, remote push.
Cool.
So yeah, just copy and paste this code on master branch, and then you would do a git push -u origin master. And what this does, it pushes everything to origin master, which origin is the remote repo on the master branch. Branch set up to track remotely. Everything should be good to go. Let's go back. No, that's the only thing that's there. See, I knew that was going to be giving me issues. Git add.
It won't add
Yep.
empty folders.
Oh, that's why. Yeah. So
You have to do like a .gitignore file in the empty
Right.
folders, or git keep
Mhm.
in the empty folders, and then it will.
okay. So yeah, that makes sense. So essentially, it would have added all the CSS to images in the JavaScript folder, but I don't have anything in there. So let me show you. I'll create a README file. This will just be in Markdown. Hi. Markdown. README. So now it shows that I have one untracked file because I created a brand new file. So it's nothing added to commit, but there's untracked files present. So I'd have to git add the README. Now it shows new file to be staged. It's in the staging area, so it's hanging there in limbo, so I can always pull it out. So if I wanted to, I could do a git reset head in capitals, and then that file. Do another git status, and then it goes back to untracked. So it pulled it out of the index if I don't want to do anything with it. Now I do want to push it out, so I'm going to do a git add readme, git commit, readme added, and then do a git push. Now you'll see it update on my GitHub page after the push is made. So we're good to go. Everything's good.
Nice.
And the README file's up there. Now, if I wanted to make changes to this, raw changes in GitHub, I can do that. Oops. Let me go to... edit this file. Now these hashes, this is GitHub flavored Markdown, which everybody should have got one of those little green pamphlets. Sweet. Markdown is what they use to write their README files in GitHub. It's pretty simple stuff. I never started using it till a couple weeks ago, and I thought, oh, this is pretty sweet.
This is where I started.
Really? So I made changes to the README file. I can go down and commit them. So those are committed. Now, so this is the new README file on GitHub. Okay. I'll go back over to my terminal. Run a git status. Now it says it's up to date with origin master. And do a git pull. Now this shows 1 file change and 3 insertions. So I made a change to that file. Everything's good. So everything's up to date. So now I pulled all the changes down from my remote onto my local. And you can make changes again on your local, push them back out to your remote. So another thing I want to talk about was git ignore. So git ignore, it's a file that lets you ignore certain files. So if you're working in SAS or Sublime, even OS 10, Bower, you have all these different files and folders that you really don't want to push out remotely. So like your Bower components, your SAS cache, it's hard to say that. Yeah, ds_store, that's our default files that come from the file structure on your machines. You don't want to push that stuff out. You just want strictly the code. So what you can do is, you can type in OS 10. So, okay, so sweet, so that's like your ds-store, all your hidden files, some of your hidden files. That'll be in that README file. Say I'm writing my CSS in SAS and it's creating a bunch of files I don't want to push up. I want that in there. It's giving me Bower components. I don't want to write this git ignore file myself because I don't know what the hell to put in it. I'm using a bunch of technology, but I don't know what files and folders I don't want. Sublime Text even has it. So you can put all these different things in, and you can generate this file created through git ignore. So you have all your OS 10 thumbnails, which are your hidden file stuff. Your files from SAS, your Bower components, Sublime Text stuff that they do. You can copy all of it. You can go back to your folder structure here. You can do a touch.gitignore. Excuse me. Open it. Paste that in there. Save it. So now it shows that I have one file that's untracked, which is my git ignore file. So now that you have this locally, this will start ignoring files locally too. So that's what you want. You want to ignore these files locally because anybody that wants to push out, they're not going to be pushing all these other files and folders. So I want to do a git add. Now it's ready to be committed. It's in the staging area. Git commit -m git ignore file. Git status. Git push to push it out to my remote repo. Everything's good. 100% compressing objects. We're good to go. Go over here to your GitHub. Bam. And it's in there. Now you could, if anybody's pulling down or cloning that repo, they'll get that git ignore file and it'll start ignoring all the files they have in their machine. And then they can contribute to that git ignore file if they're saying they're using Yeoman or they're using Grunt or Gulp, for build systems. They can add, all those hidden files in there and contribute back to that code. Another one I want to show you guys is git ignore, common git ignore, and this is a website I designed and developed. I used Bootstrap and SAS. I pulled everything from git ignore, so essentially it's just a website just to go to. So if your workflow you're using OS 10, Sublime Text, and SAS, click that. It'll have the ignore file right there for you. If you're using Windows, Sublime and SAS. It's right there. Linux Sublime and SAS. If you're using OS 10, Espresso and SAS. TextMate, Notepad++, whatever code editor you're using, and if you're just using SAS. You can go there, pull that. I encourage anybody to go fork this, clone it, add to it. This is the first one I ever released it to any sort of type of public. And it's been sitting here for,
This is us
yeah.
seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, and James, because we and James did a class together, but it never got put into the Girl Develop It curriculum slides.
Well, thank
So,
you for sharing that
Yeah,
with
you can
us.
check that out. So yeah, it's pretty sweet. Let me try and get back to good stuff here.
Do you want to do like show a poll? Give me access to it. Yeah, like that. If you don't want to do like
I wouldn't even know how to give you access, Nick.
just go to settings, collaborators, and then there's an ad. Oh yeah, search right there. Type in Nick DeMars. Whenever you want to show a poll of somebody else. You know what I mean? Like if more than one person is working on
Right.
a project.
To do a poll. Because the only time I've ever done it was with you.
So wait, so Nick, so I think what you want to do though is you want to have Nick do a poll, right? You just gave him.
I just gave him collaborator
So
access.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push. Oh yeah, you just updated some stuff. Alright, so I just committed some code to your repo, and so that will often happen when you're working with other people. Is that they'll commit code to the same repository, and you want to pull down their new stuff into your local machine. So you have their changes or new features or copy changes or whatever. So that way you're working on the newest code that's in the repository.
Right, that's right here, hello.html.
Yep.
I have a question. He just added you so you could make pull requests and you could clone from their repository. But you have
I gotta
to
pull my
submit
pull.
any keys like SSH keys in order to pull or.
No, so he added me directly to his repository. Earlier when he mentioned forking. So if you have other people who want to contribute to your code, they would click that fork button. And that would basically put essentially like a clone of their repository into your account. Then you can mess with it as if it was yours. And then as soon as you're ready to give somebody that new feature or that the code that you've been working on, you would go into GitHub to that same where your code's at, and then put in you would click what's it called here? So you'd go to like the actual branch. Oh, it doesn't say on here because this is only one branch here. It would basically say like open a pull request, and that pull request would then you could explain what it's a form to explain what you've changed for the repository owner. They then get an email and they get to review to say, hey, there's some code that somebody wants to put into your repository. Are you okay with it or not? And then that actually starts a larger discussion. So there can be, within that pull request, more code can be added, more comments can be added, like line comments and everything. And then as soon as the owner of that repository is okay with the new code, then they can hit merge, and they would merge your code right into theirs.
So it's interesting the semantics there, right? Because you say it's like I'm gonna fork this, makes you think like, yeah, that is a pull request, right? But it's not, you're just forking it to like start your own clone and hacking away, like Chris was saying, right? And then when the formal pull request goes in, that's like you're actually notifying the branch master, right? That, hey, I've formally done the fork and I intend to submit it back to merge.
I gotta figure out so how would I merge yours in?
It's already in there.
Okay.
So
yeah.
because you gave me access to commit directly.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But now if you want it, so you make a change over on your code. So like, or if you go to your terminal, and you want to now pull in the newest version.
Yeah,
Because,
I just did a git pull.
because otherwise you have potentially a older version of the code because stuff has been happening outside of your computer.
Right, so whenever Chris is executing a git status command, he's getting the status of his local repo. And so if he's got changes, it's showing, hey, changes are staged or files not tracked or whatever, but his local repo, when it does a status, doesn't know what's been merged back to the remote repo, right, until he does his next pull.
Sorry, that was I got you off track.
Oh no.
That's a 200 level move. I don't know. This is a 100 level class. I don't know why we were doing 200 level stuff.
It's always good to have other people working on projects with you, though, even if like.
Back here with the other stuff I had.
There you go.
All right, sweet.
So yeah, we are at our scheduled time. So.
Yep, I'm ending it right now. We're right at the end. So in conclusion, I just want to say that Git is fast. It's distributed, which makes it really, really powerful, really good to use. It's fast because the way it takes snapshots and versions of those, not files themselves. It's powerful, and in my opinion, which could be biased if you're a Subversion or ClearCase user, it's the best VCS, I think, in terms of, you can use it for enterprise level stuff. You can use it for personal stuff. That's how I started. Open source is a huge thing. Future events, like I said, April 14th at Atomic Object in Ann Arbor. Girl develop it. I'm doing an intro to Git and GitHub class. So if anybody wants to join that meetup group, especially the Detroit meetup group too, really, really cool. Meet a lot of cool people. Same as Refresh. There's people out there with opportunities. Learn some things. I have a list of resources: ProGit, Git, GitHub, Git Immersion, Git the Simple Guide, gitignore.io, Common, Gitignore, and then try Git. Those resources help everyone out. I just want to say thanks to Wayne State for holding the talk here. Thanks for Refresh Detroit for letting me speak. My first talk I've ever given.
Really?
So, yeah, I could never pull the trigger before. So,
Hey.
Yeah.
and thank you. And everybody, I thank everybody for coming out and listening to me ramble for an hour about Git and GitHub.